Welcome. This video demonstrates viscodissection in posterior polar cataract, a challenging type of cataract where the central opacity is tightly adherent to the posterior capsule. I will walk you step by step through my surgical approach, focusing on techniques that enhance safety and control. Step 1 is creating a capsulorhexis, about 5 to 5.5 millimeters. In posterior polar cataracts, this controlled size reduces stress on the fragile capsule, maintains stability for IOL placement in the bag or sulcus if needed, and provides flexibility to manage complications, including posterior capsular rupture. The next key step is hydrodelineation. Unlike hydrodissection, it separates the nucleus from the epinucleus without forcing fluid behind the lens, reducing stress and safeguarding the fragile posterior capsule. For nucleus management, I used a controlled divide and conquer technique. The key is to perform phacoemulsification in slow motion with low flow, low vacuum, and low power settings. This minimizes turbulence and mechanical stress on the capsule, reducing the chance of a sudden rupture. It is important not to rotate the nucleus. In posterior polar cataracts, the central plaque is often firmly adherent to the capsule, and rotation can easily tear it. Instead, rely on the epinuclear shell created by hydrodelineation. This epinucleus acts as a scaffold, protecting the capsule and helping to contain the nuclear fragments during emulsification. Throughout the case, careful control of chamber pressure is essential. Always maintain a stable anterior chamber. A dispersive viscoelastic should be used liberally, and I make a point to inject it through a side port before withdrawing the phaco or irrigation and aspiration tip. This prevents the chamber from collapsing and keeps the capsule supported. Another important principle is to leave the central posterior polar plaque until the very end. Remove the surrounding nuclear material and epinucleus first, so that the plaque can be dealt with under the safest and most controlled conditions. During these steps, remain alert to early warning signs of trouble. A sudden deepening of the anterior chamber, an oval pupil, or a change in the red reflex can indicate a posterior capsular rupture. Always have a plan B in mind. Be ready to tamponade the vitreous with dispersive viscoelastic and proceed to anterior vitrectomy if necessary. By following these principles, divide and conquer without rotation, slow motion phaco, careful pressure control, and delayed management of the plaque, you maximize safety and minimize the risk of capsular rupture in posterior polar cataract surgery. Once the nucleus is removed, the next step is epinucleus management. Using the IA tip on low flow and low vacuum, I gently separate the peripheral epinuclear cortical layer from the posterior capsule to create a space. Into this pocket, dispersive viscoelastic is injected in a targeted way. It cushions the capsule, helps separate the epinucleus cortex from the capsule, and tamponades the vitreous if a micro tear is present. Key safety measures include keeping the aspiration port facing upward, working from the periphery toward the center, and never engaging the fragile posterior capsule directly. The central posterior polar plaque is always left until last. If it remains firmly adherent after careful viscodissection, it is safer to leave it and manage later with a YAG capsulotomy rather than risk a posterior capsular rupture. Fortunately, in this case, the capsule remained intact after viscodissection. During lens insertion, however, one haptic was noted to be adherent to the optic. Instead of pushing or dialing, I used the rhexis forceps to gently squeeze the haptic tip, releasing it easily with controlled and localized force while avoiding unnecessary stress on the capsule. In summary, careful planning, controlled techniques, and the use of viscodissection can greatly improve safety in posterior polar cataract surgery. With patience and precision, the capsule can be preserved and a stable IOL successfully implanted. Thank you.